Thank you. I'm gonna be going between sitting and standing, and I want to thank Edie for bringing in the spirit of cannabis. As I was doing this presentation, when I first thought of it, I was like, I'm gonna explain to everyone why we're so mad, because I get this question so much. And I know a lot of people have been in spaces where you have that question, like, why is that person so mad? Why is she so mad? Why are they so mad? And I was like, I'm gonna explain it, and everybody's gonna know why we're mad. And then I started working with the medicine, and the medicine was like, actually, I have something else that you're gonna do. Like, you're gonna talk briefly about why, and then we're also gonna hear the stories, right? We're gonna learn, really, really settling into the importance of this rage through some of our ancient ancestors. So the call was to talk about elders, and I'm going to be talking about the elders who are the goddesses, right? And what they teach us about rage and the implications of these lessons and stories on the psychedelic space. So this is a email that I got from a colleague when I was in the CIS program. We can talk about the title of the email, which was Later Yo. I don't really understand what he was trying to say. That's a whole nother conversation. But I just took a screenshot of the length of the email so you can kind of see how long this man's message to me was, right? And the parts that are highlighted is really essentially what the point of the email was. And that was, why are you so confrontational? Right? One of my colleagues that was in the cohort is right here, so she knows. Why is Courtney so confrontational? And the squeaky wheel gets the oil and you squeaked, but your style of squeaking is confrontational from my perspective. And he also said, God, I wish I was that comfortable speaking in public. I admire that I didn't squeak enough. There's this, you can't be angry. You can't do that. Why are you doing this? And also, dang, I wish I could do a little bit of that too, right? There's a lot of nuance in this email. But, this is the essential parts of it. And so I want to talk about rage, the definition of rage. So we have violent and uncontrollable anger. The violent action of a natural agency, so that's like the rage of the sea. A vehement desire or passion. An instance of aggressive behavior that is caused by a stressful or frustrating situation. And then the last one is like a literary device, an intense feeling, especially prophetic, a poetic or marital enthusiasm or ardor. This is what rage is. This is the totality, right? And then we get into sacred rage, right? Sacred rage is a form of anger and indignation that arises in response to injustices or violations of deeply held moral and ethical values. In this context, rage is not seen as a negative or destructive force, but a powerful and transformational emotion that can drive individuals or communities to take action for positive change. The term sacred in this context emphasizes the deeply held beliefs and values that underlie the anger, suggesting that anger is not only justified, but also rooted in a sense of righteousness and moral duty. It reflects the idea that some forms of anger can be transformative and serves as catalysts for positive change in the world. When I am angry, it's rooted in the sense of righteousness and moral duty, right? When people are speaking and they're like, I feel erased. Like, what the fuck, right? It's rooted in the sense of righteousness and moral duty. And I invite everyone to kind of sit with what comes up for you when you think about, like, I am a Black woman doing this presentation on anger, right? We all have learned that Black people can't be angry. Black women are not supposed to be angry. It's scary if Black women are angry. It's dangerous if Black women are angry. Like, that is just the truth. And if that, I have also been indoctrinated into the system. If you're like, no, I don't feel that way. I think you need to do more work. We all have that here. It's in all of us. It is true, right? And I want you to sit with, as we go through these communities of color and look at the rage of these women and listen to the stories of their goddesses, I want you to sit with, like, what's coming up for me? Where's my rage, and how am I responding in reaction to their rage? So to kind of frame our work together, we're going to be going through different communities of color. I want to say that these are a heterogeneous group of women. Even though we're talking about a racial group, diversity exists inside of these racial groups amongst the women, whether there's ethnicities, identities, and perspectives. These are not homogenous groups. The context for race. This is a very, very, very small snapshot of why anger exists for women in these communities. And I say that because my goal when I first talked about this presentation was to present a full context. I'm gonna do history on everyone and we're gonna talk about it. And once I started working with the medicine and she started changing the slides a little bit, then I was like, oh, it's like actually is a snapshot, right? Like, and I'm curious about the lesson in that. Do I need to spend my time explaining to you why we're mad so that you can get it, so you can finally understand? Do I want to do that for an hour? Or is the medicine like, baby, we got other things to talk about, So just again, grateful for cannabis's influence in this space. And this is a medicine that I do have a relationship with. And then we're going to be talking about ancient anger lessons from the divine elders, collective ancestors, sacred energies, goddesses, imparting lessons about sacred anger. So we're going to do a little bit of call and response. Every time you see a new group of women, I want you to say out of your mouth, why are you so angry? You can say it. Why are you so angry? You can say, why are you so angry? However you want to say it. I've got both. And we're going to do that and really sit with the fact that this is a question that we have anytime we are confronted with the anger of women in these communities.
Why are you so angry?
Context for the rage, the MAFA, which is the Black Holocaust, which is Black folks being stripped and taken, kidnapped, tortured, raped, pillaged from their homelands, put on a boat and brought here to create a different country for free, with the intent that you work until you die, right? And then American chattel slavery, which, a lot of people are like, oh, there was slavery everywhere. There was not slavery like there was in the United States. This is a very different type of slavery, chattel slavery, right? Also segregation. Once we got the liberation and when we got free, and then there was this beautiful period of Reconstruction area where there was this growth and this development and flourishment, and then legally ways to suppress Blackness, to suppress Black joy, to suppress Black life, success, whatever, right? And then demonization of indigenous practices, and I'm talking about spiritual systems like candomblé, like hoodoo, like voodoo. Those systems still bring up fear for people. You think about some crazy skeleton demon person when you hear these, that's also a context for rage, because that is our medicine. That's our source of knowing, that's our spirituality, but we don't get to practice it and then it gets demonized. Context for rage, violence, misogynoir. This is a term coined by Moya Bailey. And it's the idea that it's not just misogyny, which is a hatred against women, but misogynoir is a hatred against Black women. And the very specific ways that misogyny shows up for Black women. And then, it was legal to rape a Black woman. You could do that. It was something that was not illegal. And, that kind of makes you mad, if you think about it. Disparities. We have ongoing health and healthcare biases. We know that the Black mortality rate for Black women is extremely high. Income disparities, sexual violence statistics, Black women, indigenous women, which we're also going to get to, but Black women have extremely high statistics for encountering and experiencing sexual violence. Over-incarceration. So yes, Black men are over-incarcerated, but so too are Black women, right? And then the erasure. We also have plant medicines in our indigenous communities and spiritual systems, and we're not talking about that unless it's Iboga, which is the one exotified one now. The contributions to the medical field with the knowledge of plant medicines midwifery, and then also the contributions with our bodies. Like J. Marion Sims developed like gynecological practices off of enslaved Black women's bodies without anesthesia, right? Like, and that story is erased. And then also, I mean, underrepresentation in the field is for everyone. We're not represented in research on research teams besides Monica Williams. Love you, boo, but she's not the only one out here, you know. Research teams, subject matter experts, subject pool, like we're just not present, right? So, you know, these things would kind of make you mad. What do you think? Yeah? Okay. So now we're going to talk about Oya. So Oya is the West African Yoruba goddess of storms and change. She was known for her fiery temper and her ability to bring about powerful transformations. She was fierce and a passionate deity, and her anger was legendary in the divine realm. And then one day, a drought had descended upon the land. The rivers had dried up, the crops had withered, and the people were suffering. Oya watched as her beloved land turned into a barren wasteland, and her anger burned within her like a raging inferno. She decided that she could no longer stand idly by. In her winds, she gathered dark clouds and unleashed a tempest of thunder and lightning. The heavens roared in response to her fury, and rain poured down in torrents. Oya's anger manifested in the form of a fierce storm, shaking the earth and drenching it with much needed water. As the rain fell, the parched earth drank greedily, and the land began to heal. The rivers swelled, the crops began to grow again. Oya's anger had brought about a transformation, turning desolation into abundance. But Oya's anger is not limited to the natural world. She was also a champion of justice. She was known to take the oppressive and corrupt, fighting for the rights of the downtrodden. Her wrath would descend upon those who sought to exploit and harm others. And so from Oya, we learn that bringing all of one's power and resources to address suffering, anger as transformation, desolation to abundance. And a cautionary tale for the psychedelic world is those who are well-resourced and fully in their power will bring much-needed nourishment to those who have been neglected by the psychedelic space.
Why are you so angry?
So we're talking about angry Native and First Nations women, right? History, the initial land theft. We are on the land of First Nations folks, of indigenous folks in America, colonization and genocide. I've done a lot of work of looking at pre-colonial conditions for different ethnic groups. And for Black folks, we were intentionally supposed to stay alive so that we can work for free. For Native Americans, they were essentially supposed to die so that they could get this land, so that the genocide that happened in Native communities was like, we want to murder. Not just the men, but we want to murder the women and the children, because that is how these communities continue, right? That is very intentional. History, the Trail of Tears, and also indigenous practices being criminalized. You know, like everybody loves a good white sage cleanse. And it was only 40 years ago that indigenous folks in the United States got the ability to be able to use white sage again because it was illegal. Violence, missing and murdered indigenous women. This is an ongoing issue. And I'd say it never stopped, right? Kidnapping indigenous women and murdering indigenous women has been what's been happening on this country since white folks came here, right? It's an ongoing issue where disproportionately high numbers of indigenous women are missing and murdered. It's exacerbated by jurisdictional issues, poor data collection, and human trafficking. We are still currently displacing indigenous people, right? We are still currently displacing indigenous people. This is an ongoing displacement. Cultural appropriation, whether that's Halloween, which is kind of more mainstream, but also all of the fucking cultural appropriation that happens in the psychedelic space. That is violence. That is a context for rage. The commodification of peyote. I am one of those people that personally believe that if this is someone's sacred tradition and I'm not initiated into that tradition, I don't have to. There's so many other medicines. I really don't have to use peyote. That does not have to be what I do. And some people feel entitled to this sacred medicine. Haven't we taken a fucking enough? We haven't taken enough. We got to take peyote too. Disparities, health and healthcare biases. There is documentation of the ways that Native women are treated and left to die. Still. Income and education disparities. Erasure. Let's talk about the erasure of local indigenous groups, right? This is one of the things that the lady that interrupted the MAPS closing ceremony was mad about. We have elders who are from here that you are not treating well, but instead you're doing all of these things for these folks from other places. That erasure of I'm right here and you can't see me, but you're gonna take care of like people that ain't from here, like you on my land displacing me. You know, I'm getting angry. Are you?
Yeah.
And then also the tokenism of people and practices. People are tokenized too. We'll have one indigenous person that can be here and they're gonna speak for everybody, right? Do this drum ceremony for us. Make sure that when you come, you wear your regalia. Don't be in jeans and a sweatshirt. You need to dress up for us. You gotta perform for us. You gotta show us who you are. Are you mad?
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about Sedna. Sedna,
Why are you so angry?
in a coastal Inuit village where there lived a young woman named Anouk. She was known for her extraordinary beauty, but she was also known for her vanity and pride. Anouk spent hours admiring her reflection in the calm waters of the sea, believing herself to be the most beautiful person in the world. Then one day, a handsome hunter named Nanook arrived in the village. Nanook was strong, kind-hearted, and skilled in hunting. His reputation as a provider quickly won the admiration of the villagers, including Anouk. Anouk, driven by her vanity, set her sights on Anouk and decided that she must have him as her husband. She used her charm and her beauty to capture his attention, and before long they were married. However, as time passed, Anouk's true nature began to reveal itself. She became possessive and jealous, demanding that Anouk pay all his attention to her and neglect his hunting duties. Her selfishness caused discord in their marriage, and their village soon suffered as Anouk's hunting skills deteriorated. The once abundant sea creatures seemed to vanish from the waters, and the villagers faced hunger and hardship. They realized that Anouk's vanity and jealousy were the cause of their misfortune, and they pleaded with her to release Anouk from her control to allow him to return to his hunting. Anouk's anger flared at the villagers' words, and she refused to change her ways. She believed herself to be the most important person in the world and cared little for the suffering of others. I hope you're starting to see these parallels. Sedna, the sea goddess who watched over the Inuit people and their relationship with the ocean, could no longer bear to see the villagers suffer. She decided to intervene. One night, as Anouk gazed into the water, she saw her own reflection distort and transform into a monstrous, wrathful figure. Sedna rose from the depths of the sea, her hair a tangled mess of kelp, her finger as sharp as fish hooks, and she reached out and grabbed Anouk by the arms, pulling her into the icy waters. Anouk screamed in terror as she descended into the underworld where Sedna ruled. In her underworld realm, Sedna revealed her true anger and power. She transformed Anouk into a sea spirit, forever bound to the ocean's depths. Anouk, now humbled and filled with remorse, could only watch as her former village prospered once more under the care of Nanook, who resumed his role as a skilled hunter. Sedna's anger serves as a lesson, teaching Anouk the consequences of vanity, selfishness, and neglecting the well-being of the community. The villagers, grateful for their deliverance from suffering, honored Sedna with the ceremonies and offering, knowing that her wrath had restored balance and harmony to their lives. Vanity, selfishness, community neglect will not be tolerated. Balance and harmony will be restored. Those who trick change makers doing meaningful work in the psychedelic space in order to achieve personal gain will endure the wrath and cries, when the cries of the exploited are heard.
Why are you so angry?
Colonization. So many places this shows up. Systemic and institutional racism against our Latina sisters. The sexualized stereotypes of the feisty, spicy Latina. That's problematic. That's stuff that's enraging. That doesn't capture the fullness of a person. Violence, migration discrimination. Migration, not immigration. Migration discrimination and detention. If you're moving over a landmass to a place, you are not immigrating, you are migrating. If your people came over on a boat, guess who was immigrating? Over policing, political targets, and these are political targets for white Christian nationalists. Disparities, health and healthcare biases, education and income disparities, sexual violence again, over-incarceration again, erasure, the exotification and extraction from indigenous spirituality. Tokenism and psychedelics. This is Meek Tekasiwatl. Tekasiwatl, an ancient Aztec goddess of death and the underworld, was known for her solemn and mysterious demeanor. However, there was one story that spoke to her rare display of anger. In the world of the living, there lived a young woman, a young and arrogant warrior named Tezcatl. Tezcatl was renowned for his physical prowess and fearlessness in battle. He believed he was invincible and scoffed at the idea of showing any respect to the gods or the spirits of the dead. One fateful day, as Tezcatl was returning from a victorious battle, he happened upon a sacred burial site. This burial site was dedicated to Tekasiwatl, where offerings and prayers were made to honor the souls of the departed. Disregarding the sacredness of the place, Tezcatl trampled the offerings, defiled the sacred ground, and boasted loudly about his achievements. As Tezcatl continued his arrogant tirade, the earth beneath him suddenly trembled, and a chilling wind swept through the graveyard. The sky darkened, and a shadowy figure emerged from the depths of the burial site. It was Tekasiwatl, the queen of the dead, her face obscured by a veil of skulls and bone. Tekasiwatl's voice echoed like a distant thunder as she spoke, her anger palpable. She admonished Tezcatl for his disrespect, reminding him that the dead must be honored and treated with reverence. She warned him that his arrogance would not go unpunished. Filled with terror, Tezcatl fell to his knees and begged for forgiveness. But Tekasiwatl's anger was not easily appeased. She decreed that Tezcatl must undergo a harrowing journey into the underworld to learn the true meaning of respect and humility. With a wave of her skeletal hand, she cast a spell that transported him to the realm of Mictlan, the Aztec underworld. There he faced countless trials and challenges, confronting his own arrogance and recklessness at every turn. It was a journey of suffering and self-discovery, and he emerged a humble and wiser man. Her anger serves as a lesson, teaching him the importance of respect for the dead and the consequences of arrogance. From that day forward, he became a humble and devout warrior, offering prayers and offerings at the sacred burial sites dedicated to the Queen of the Dead. The story of her anger became a cautionary tale among the Aztecs, a reminder of the importance of showing reverence for the spirits of the deceased and the consequences of disrespecting the sacred. It served as a testament to the power of the goddess of death and the transformative potential of anger in delivering important lessons. Desecrating the sacred in favor of material wealth has consequences. Show reverence to the sacred. Those who place the wealth to be gained by psychedelics over the necessity for honoring the sacred will be humbled by the foolishness of their own arrogance. And these are not like happy stories. It's not like, and at the end, no. Some people die. You just die, right? Anger does not always have a happy ending. It doesn't always end in joy. And what is the lesson in that? Sometimes people say, oh, but you could have said it differently. If you just would have said it like this, then I think they would have been able to hear you. Your anger is divisive. I don't know what's more divisive about being displaced from your homeland. I think that's the ultimate divide. Or being on your homeland and not being able to move the way that you want to move. That's what's divisive to me. Being angry in response to that, in response to the continued erasure of your place in this psychedelic space, that anger in response to that is divisive?
Why are you so angry?
So this is the Green Gang. They combat social injustice. They gather together to confront men troubling their wives and wreaking havoc on their families. Negligence through drinking and gambling. It's a group of women that gathers together and, what are you doing? Get your shit together. History, colonization, right? Again, colonization. Violence, colorism. I intentionally put dark-skinned women of color on this presentation because so often dark-skinned Latinas and dark-skinned South Asian women are erased. And so, I don't know if anybody noticed or you had a reaction to that, but we come in all colors in all these communities of color. Colorism is violence. The domestic violence that occurs in South Asian populations, xenophobia around language, around culture, disparities in mental health, and then also South Asians are also invisible as an Asian population. When you think of AAPI, you rarely think about South Asian women as well. And then whitewashed spiritual systems like yoga. The way that yoga, it looks and exists here. Like Tantra, the way that Tantra looks and exists here. That's erasure. That's a context for rage. Being exotified and tokenized. Tokenized through music, having the deities tokenized. I was in a class and this lady had said that she had the shrine to Kali and she was feeding Kali. And I was and she was giving Kali hibiscus water. And I'm like, I don't think that that's what Kali takes. Hibiscus water? I don't think you should be messing with that. I'm pretty sure Kali takes something red, but it's not hibiscus water. So this is the story of Kali's anger. Once in a distant village in India, there lived a powerful and arrogant king named Raja Banu. He ruled with an iron fist, oppressing his subjects and amassing wealth at their expense. He believed himself to be invincible and reveled in his cruelty. The people of the village suffered under Raja Banu's oppressive rule. Their pleas for justice and compassion fell on deaf ears, and their anger simmered beneath the surface. Desperate for relief, they turned to the gods for help. In response to their cries, Kali, the fierce goddess of destruction, heard their prayers. She decided to teach Raja Banu a lesson he would never forget. She appeared before him one night, her form dark and menacing, her eyes ablaze with anger. Raja Banu, accustomed to being feared, was initially defiant. He mocked Kali and dared her to do her worst. In response, Kali's anger flared, and her tongue extended like a fiery serpent. With one swift motion, she devoured him, leaving only his crown and jewels behind. The next morning, the villagers discovered the remnants of their once tyrannical king. They were initially shocked, but as they realized they were free from his oppression, their fear turned to gratitude. They celebrated Kali as their savior, offering prayers and thanks and performing rituals in her honor. Kali's anger has served as a catalyst for justice and liberation. She had shown that even the most ruthless of tyrants could be brought to justice, and that the oppressed could find relief from their suffering. The village flourished under a just and compassionate leader, and Kali's name was revered for generations to come as a symbol of righteous anger and the power of divine intervention. This story highlights Kali's role as a force of justice and a protector for the oppressed, demonstrating that her anger can be a potent tool for positive change when directed against those whose abuse of power oppresses others. Wealth cannot protect you from divine justice. Those who were exploited will be liberated. Those who have gained wealth and power through the exploitation of the medicines or people will incite anger amongst the mortal and the divine, and then they will be eaten.
Why are we so angry?
So this is Leela Lee, who created a comic called The Angry Little Asian Girl. It challenges gender and racial stereotypes. That's Kim, a little 6-year-old Korean girl who unleashes her anger on injustice. Colonization, when does it not show up? Colonization and whitewashing historically is a context for rage. There's also a lot of unresolved war trauma that is present for a lot of East Asian communities. Violence, cultural appropriation, xenophobia around language and culture, specifically language. There's a lot of really problematic things that people do to East Asian folks around language. Domestic violence, there's mental health disparities, and then sex and human trafficking is also a disparity that provides a context for rage. The erasure, the ways that like East Asian women sexually are exotified and then also labeled as sexually passive. Ali Wong is a great example of someone that's like, fuck that shit. She talks about eating ass on stage, you know? Like, she's like, yeah, you know. And she has a bit where she talks about, I'm talking about eating ass, and people get all uncomfortable because I talk about eating ass. And she's like, it's because I'm Asian. That people are like, oh, you eat ass too? She's like, yeah, everybody does it. Whitewashed spiritual systems like mindfulness, Buddhism, right? The ways that the full context and the spirituality of these systems gets taken away and it gets commodified and made into something that you can make money off of. But not something that East Asian folks can make money off of, something that white folks can make money off of. Yeah. And then the dehumanizing model minority myth. So we are going to hear about Izunami, the ancient Japanese goddess of creation and death. And if someone can give me a time check, so I kind of...
You have 15 more minutes and then questions.
Okay, cool. I got time. This is the ancient Japanese Japanese goddess of creation and death. Was revered as a symbol of both life and the underworld. While she was primarily associated with creation and birth, there's a story that tells of her rare display of anger. Long ago in the celestial realm of Takamagahara, Izunami and her divine counterpart, Izunagi, stood at the precipice of the heavens, contemplating the creation of the world. They were tasked with the sacred mission of bringing order and life to the chaotic cosmos. Together they wielded a sacred jeweled spear, and as they thrust it into the churning sea below, the drops that fell from the tips formed the islands of Japan. They were filled with joy as they beheld the beauty of their creation from the towering mountains and lush green forests. However, as they ventured into their mission, tragedy struck. When giving birth to the fire deity Kagusuchi, Izunami was severely burned and ultimately succumbed to her injuries. Her anguished cries echoed through the heavens as she descended into Yomi no Kuni, the land of the dead, where she would forever dwell. Izunagi, heartbroken and consumed with grief, refused to accept the loss of his beloved. He resolved to journey into the underworld to retrieve Izunami from the clutches of death. Armed with a torch, he ventured to the shadowy realm of Yomi no Kuni, determined to find his wife and bring her back to the land of the living. As he journeyed through the dark and desolate land, he finally found Izunami. But to his horror, she had transformed into a grotesque and decaying figure. Her once beautiful countenance was now twisted in agony, and her anger and sorrow had consumed her. Izanami, in her anguish, rebuked her husband, warning him, "Do not look upon her in her wretched state," but curiosity overcame him, and he lit his torch to behold her. What he saw filled him with terror, for she was nothing more than a rotting, malevolent spirit. Enraged by Izanagi's disobedience and betrayal, Izanami unleashed a fury upon him, sending a legion of vengeful spirits to chase him from the underworld. Izanagi fled in terror, rolling a giant boulder to seal the entrance of Yomi no Kuni behind him, narrowly escaping the grasp of the underworld's wrath. She was on one side of the stone, he was on the other side of the stone. And she said that she'd kill 1,000 people a day because of what he did. And he responded he'd make 1,500 be born in response to the deaths. From her anger and heartbreak, we get life. Izanami's anger was a force that forever separated the world of the living from the world of the dead. Despite her transformation into a fearsome deity, she remained the symbol of the cycle of life and death, and a reminder that anger can arise from profound grief and loss. Izanami's story serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of meddling with the natural order and the inevitability of death in the grand tapestry of existence. When a woman tells you a situation is bad, just listen. Just listen. We don't have to find out. This is a story of the cycles of life and death. And then endings are inevitable. Those who attempt to bypass the natural laws of beginnings and endings in favor of their own wants and desires will bring about widespread destruction. And then, in the end, it will happen anyway. And new beginnings will come.
Why are you so angry?
Does anyone know what Swana is?
Oh, yes.
Okay. How many people don't know what Swana is? That's why they're angry. Swana is it's Southwest Asian, Northern African, as opposed to Middle Eastern. Context for rage for Swana women. The history of colonization. Where did they not go? They went everywhere and destroyed civilizations everywhere. War in order to extract the natural resources of the land. Islamophobia. Post 9/11 violence, xenophobia, health and education disparities, and then also just like, I feel like the fact that like for Swana women, like erasure is such a thing. On the U.S. Census, if you're Swana, you normally have to identify as white. Because there's no place for someone that is Southwest Asian or Northern African. You might identify as Asian, but most people that are Middle Eastern on the U.S. Census are forced to identify as white. There's just complete erasure. And then also the idea that everybody that lives in Swana regions are Muslim, and the erasure of non-Muslim religions, including Christianity, including Judaism. Because I'm pretty sure that Judaism and Christianity started in the Swana regions, right? Jerusalem is in the Swana region. And somehow, the only thing that we think about or conceptualize is Islam in relation to Swana folks, right? Also, agency with hijabs. Like, a lot of times we say, oh, you wear a hijab, you're so oppressed. And, like, that's not the truth. There's a lot of folks that have an agency and enjoy wearing hijabs or even burqas, like whatever sort of ways that they choose. And then there's also a lot of political movements, which is outside of the context of this presentation, but where like women are wearing hijabs and also like covering, like showing part of their hair as resistance, right? Like Swana women do not need us to come in and save them from what's happening in their country or what's happening in their culture or their religious systems. Like they're very well capable of doing that on their own. And then also there's some misattribution of psychedelics. So like there's like completely like this erasure of the Middle East, and also just misattribution, the fact that psychedelics are even present there too. So we're going to talk about Inanna, and then we're going to go to Sekhmet, and then I'm going to finish. So this is the ancient Sumerian goddess of love, fertility, and war. She's known for her complex and multifaceted character. While she represents love and sensuality, she also possesses the capacity for righteous anger when confronted with injustice. And here's a story that illustrates that. In the ancient city of Uruk, Inanna reigned as the beloved goddess. She was adored by people for her beauty, wisdom, and her role in granting fertility to the land. Her temple, the Iana, was a place of worship and celebration, and her devotees sang songs and danced in her honor. One day, her loyal priestess Nishubur came to her with a grave concern. She spoke of this neighboring city, Arata, whose ruler had refused to pay tribute to Inanna. This tribute was vital for the prosperity of Uruk, and Inanna felt a rising anger at the arrogance and defiance of this ruler. She decided that she could not let this affront go unpunished. She gathered her divine council and devised a plan to confront him and teach him a lesson. Her anger, driven by a sense of justice, was a formidable force. With her divine authority and her heart burning with anger, she embarked on a journey to Arata. As she traveled, her radiance illuminated the path, and the land itself responded to the presence with abundant growth and life. Upon arriving in Arata, she confronted him and demanded that he pay her tribute, acknowledging her supremacy. She spoke with authority and conviction, and her anger simmering beneath the surface. In awe of her power and beauty, he realized the error of his ways, and he agreed to pay tribute to her and promised to honor her as the supreme goddess. Her anger has been a force of justice and a reminder of her divine authority, and she returned with a tribute from Arata, and her people celebrated her victory and her wisdom. Be unapologetic in your light. Abundance will grow underfoot, even if you're angry, right? Be unapologetic in your light. And also pay me and support my people because I said so. Women in the psychedelic space who stand in their power unwaveringly will have dominion over those who deprive them of their due justice.
Why are you so angry?
Is anyone surprised that there's trans women up here?
No.
Come on now. Somebody's surprised. Somebody's surprised. How often do we talk about trans women when we talk about women, a council of women? How many presentations have you heard about trans women, right? That is a context for anger. Trans women have medically been pathologized. Their position of power in indigenous communities were held in high esteem, and like the complete erasure and also the genociding of trans women and trans folks with patriarchy and colonization. Black trans women are murdered at high disproportionate rates, but trans women, period, like the violence that trans women experience, it is so easy to murder a trans woman, right? The fact that I know trans women, they're like, I just don't know how long I'm gonna be alive, just from going on a date. Micro and macro aggressions, cisnormativity is violence, being political targets of white Christian nationalisms, disparities in health and healthcare. There's a lot of trans folks that don't even want to go to the doctor because they have to deal with the medical pathologization and all of these other things. Income and education disparities, and also there's a huge number of trans women that are doing sex trafficking. Being sex trafficked or doing survival-based sex work as opposed to sex work that is like from choice, right? And then erasure, like trans folks are just erased from history. Like people act like trans women are new, like it's a newfangled thing. No, it's been here the whole time. Ever since people were here, there's been trans women. Gender binary-based treatment models in psychedelics. The mommy and daddy are supposed to be in the room and hold you. How does that hold space for trans folks? How does that hold space for like gender diversity? And then I don't think that do we even collect data on if there are people that are trans in our psychedelic research?
We just started.
Ooh.
Like literally 2 months ago.
Okay. Well, 2 months ago. So we're making progress. Sekhmet is the ancient goddess of war, destruction, and healing, often depicted as a lion-headed deity with a fierce and powerful demeanor. Long ago in the land of Egypt, there lived a great and mighty pharaoh named Amenhotep. Under his rule, Egypt flourished, and the people lived in peace and prosperity. However, as years passed, Amenhotep his heart grew proud and arrogant. He began to believe that his power and might were unmatched in the world. One day, he heard tales of a neighboring kingdom whose warrior queen was said to be as strong and skilled as he is. Consumed by jealousy and a desire to prove his superiority, he declared war on the neighboring kingdom, intent on conquering it and claiming its riches. The people of Egypt were torn by his decision, for they knew the war would bring suffering and death. They prayed to the gods, including Sekhmet, for guidance and protection. Sekhmet, hearing the cries of the people and witnessing the pharaoh's arrogance, felt an anger rise within her like a blazing fire. She decided to teach Amenhotep a lesson about the consequences of unchecked power and pride. As the Egyptian army marched toward the neighboring kingdom, Sekhmet descended upon the battlefield in a fearsome form, her lioness head crowned with the solar disk and her eyes ablaze with wrath. She unleashed her divine fury upon the soldiers, causing chaos and destruction. Amenhotep, witnessing the devastation and recognizing the divine presence of Sekhmet, was filled with fear and remorse. He orders his troops to halt the attack and immediately sought counsel of his priests. The priests, understanding the severity of the situation, conducted a ritual to appease Sekhmet's anger. They poured offerings of wine, which had been dyed red to resemble blood, onto the earth as a symbol of life and renewal. They chanted prayers and lit incense, beseeching Sekhmet to relent. Sekhmet, her anger still burning, saw the sincerity of Amenhotep's remorse and the people's prayers for peace. Slowly, her rage subsided, and she transformed into her gentler aspect as Hathor, the goddess of love and joy. Hathor's presence brought a sense of calm and harmony to the land. She guided Amenhotep toward a more compassionate and wise rule, emphasizing the importance of peace and diplomacy. The people of Egypt learned a valuable lesson about the destruction of power, of unchecked anger and pride, and they came to revere both Sekhmet's fierce strength and Hathor's nurturing kindness. Protecting women fiercely from the arrogance of unchecked power, harmony can follow justice. Those who seek to challenge the power of women will be unpleasantly surprised. However, there is always room for change and to experience the kind stewardship of a woman after sincere repentance. So often when I talk about ancestor work and I work with white women, I say before they did it to us, they did it to y'all. You know, like whatever happened in like Gaul, you know, I have ancestors that are Gaelic, and like what happened there, like what the Romans did to the Celts, to the Germanic tribes, to the somebody else is up there, the Druids that we have no information about, right? That was the seeds that got planted for the colonization that swept the world. Like that was the structure. I mean, this is what I think. Maybe not. Somebody can challenge me on that. But also, like, there's historical the burning of the witches, the burning of the healers, the herbalists, the burning of the lesbians. Yeah, you must be a witch because you don't like dick. Or maybe I just don't want you. And then also the erasure of psychedelic women in the psychedelic space. You know, born from that anger, we get this. Woo! We're here because of anger. We're in this room because of anger. And so when we look at a woman of color who has her hand up with tears in her eyes, or her face is red, or she's mad, and she's like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? Why do I not see myself? Why do I not see my community? What I don't want you to do is ask, why are you so angry? And what I want you to do is say, how can I support you? I see you. so-and-so over here is trying to shout you out and say, no, actually, no, sir, please sit down. She's right. I just need you to sit down and stop, right?
Yeah.
Like, use your voice to be in community, because our collective rage is, especially in these times, especially in this work that we're doing, our collective rage is necessary, and we cannot afford to be silenced. So now you have a little bit of context for the rage of women of color. Stand in solidarity with us. And also, like, don't come in and try to save us. You know, if someone's like, you're like, how can I support you? And they're like, give me money. Like, that is the answer. The answer is not, okay, I don't want to do that, but I want to, you know, be the ED of your board and then ultimately take over because I don't like the direction that it's going in. And this is not a personal story, you know, but it is a story that we see, right? Like, no one needs you to be a savior. You ask, what can I do to help? And then you listen and you do that thing. Or you don't. Just shut down somebody else when they're trying to fight them. That's it.
Yeah.
I was trying to hurry up through the last bits.
5. Yep. Yes.
5 minutes of questions.
5 minutes of questions, so she says.
Any questions?
Thank you for showing up.
Yeah.
Thank you for being the highest form of reflection that I needed to see.
Ashay. Thank you for your gratitude. Because, you know, we be your sister.
Thank you for the Congress for putting me in a space that I could see myself. Thank you.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do with our righteous anger today?
What can you do with your righteous anger today? Do you know somebody that's in need? Like, there's so many, like, women of color that have organizations in this space. And often people, like, even for, like, a table of our own, like, at the end of the conference, we were like, what can we do? And Ayuse was like, you could give us some money, right? And people were like, okay, but what else can we do? And he's like, but I just gave you the answer. Because a lot of us are so under-resourced, right? If you know an organization that is led by a woman of color, you should call them and say, how much money can I give to you today? How much, what monthly, what would make sense for you, right? Our organization, we ask for small monthly donations, $20 to $50 a month, right? We got 2 people that do that. And one of it is $5, which is fine, huh?
What's the name of the organization?
Access to doorways. But I'm not just talking about my organization, really. Like, where does your heart take you? Like, what do you see, like, where you're like, oh, that's fucking it, right? Like, pour into that organization. And you can ask, well, they might not say, I need money. They might say, I need a volunteer for this event that we're doing. We are having we're having an end-of-the-year gala, which also was born out of rage of the erasure of this amazing person that you'll learn more about if you go. But buy a ticket. You know, it's tax deductible. It's kind of expensive because it's like a fundraiser, but buy a ticket so that we can celebrate the people that are actually making change in this field. You know, it's Academy for the Culture. I'm not trying to do a pub to answer that question, but come to me and I will give you ticket information afterwards. But yeah, I think also, I'm gonna come to you next. Like, really, like, there's been so many times where I raise my hand and I'm like, this is upsetting me or this is problematic, and then I get shut down by somebody else. And then people come to me afterwards and say, oh, what you said was so amazing. Thank you so much. And I said, it could have been really helpful if you said it then.
Yeah.
Don't tell me silently behind closed doors that you appreciate what my anger is doing in a space. I want you to stand by me and say, actually, no. You know, this is not helpful. That happened when we had that MAPS training. It blew up, right? Right? Because I was like, let's talk about all of these things and all of this erasure. And then somebody shut me down and somebody else shut me down. And there was a woman that said, I just want to name that this black woman in the back of the room is naming really real things. And you guys are clapping when she gets shut down. What does that say about you? Don't be afraid to stand up for people that are being shut down in their anger, especially if it's righteous. And if it scares you, do your fucking work.
Right.
You had a question back here?
No, I was just suggesting to email it to everyone.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And T-shirts that say, "If I scare you, do your fucking work."
I didn't make that. I didn't make that.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you, everybody.